would like to state once again that we are extremely happy to host President Emmanuel Macron in Cameroon, to host him as well as his delegation. This is his first visit, the first visit in Africa since his second term, and it shows the high quality of all the relations between France and Cameroon. We just had conversations, and both of us showed that we were resolute to display that cultural relationship that is mutually beneficial. I would like to share with you this feeling of satisfaction, and I said that much to President Emmanuel Macron. I feel satisfied because we feel supported. France supports us in the sense of security, especially as regards the fight against terrorism, but also support, ecological and financial support. Furthermore, we agreed to keep striving in farming, industry, and culture, as well as training and local development. And we want to focus on Cameroon's priorities. So today we talked with each other, and as on previous occasions, we covered a broad range of issues, national issues, both in French, Cameroon, and international issues as well. Among others, we mentioned the threats to security in our sub-region and in Africa, and what are the resources to face up to that threat. We also looked into the energy crisis, disruptions of grains, world grain market, and general inflation. Those are global challenges, and they should be met on that basis. Now, quite clearly, we also mentioned the war in Ukraine, destructions and suffering wrought on that occasion, with a global impact on top of that. President Macron and myself, we believe that we should leave no stone unturned to stop the war. In order to get there, we must forget about confrontation. We must prioritize conciliation and dialogue. I would like to thank the President for this. I'd like to thank him once again for accepting our invitation. Thank you for being engaged as we are. And I'd like also to thank you for your attention. Thank you very much, President. Mr. President, Madam, Ministers, MPs, dear friends, I'd like to say that I feel very happy, both myself and the whole delegation, to be here among you in Cameroon. And I'd like to thank you for your very warm welcome. We came here, as you pointed out, and this is a crucial timing. It is no happenstance that I decided to come to Cameroon for the first step, our first step in Africa, our first travel since I was re-elected. We have a very deep relationship between France and Cameroon. It's an exceptional friendship between our two countries, also because Cameroon is a strategic partner in Central Africa. This is a part of the world where I would like to devote more time to during that second term. And finally, I admire Cameroonian youth. We talked a lot about that. The excellence of graduates' talents are something for Cameroon to be proud of, and the role of France is to support wholeheartedly to support them in order for them to succeed. So we have a very old relationship between our two countries, and we have a strong bond. We have common priorities, and this is why Cameroon has been one of the first partners of the French Development Agency, and with the government, we finance about 2 billion euros projects. 200 French companies are in this country, and in all areas, they participate in the dynamism of your economy. It is a strength for us all. This French presence was competed against in the last decades. It is normal. We have to be better, more efficient, and we have to be more transparent in terms of markets, more efficient collectively. And we talked about this very long, but I'd like to diversify that cooperation beyond infrastructure and commodities regarding farming, training, digital training, industries, sport, culture. How can we do better and more? That's also the meaning of my delegation. I'd like to underline the strength of our defense cooperation. We want here again to strengthen our training. I took note of your requirements, President. And it is on the basis of this cooperation that we can act against terrorism in the Chad Lake Basin. We mentioned that situation, how to fight against terrorism in connection with all the regional countries that are impacted by terrorism, including France. France has been committed to this for quite a few years. We also mentioned the situation of a number of countries, including the Central African Republic. And we are both concerned with the regard to actions that we see there. We also agreed to work on several issues, including economic development. I mentioned a number of countries and industries where we want to advance. Also, as regards to peace, stability, and prosperity. Now, we are committed. And we spoke a lot about that. I'd like to say that France supports the decentralization process. I believe, and I said that much to the President, that regionalization is an answer to the serious crisis in Cameroon in the northwest and southwest. This political process, dialogue, reforms, advances, conciliation, and so on, this is how we can find a sustainable solution. And we want to forge ahead together. In food security, you said that much. Just after our talks, I will have an opportunity to meet some of our delegations and ministers to forge ahead. The rise in the price of commodities, inflationary supply difficulties. This is due to global issues, but it was also worsened by the war launched by Russia in Ukraine. And it has spared neither Europe nor Middle East or Africa. We're just out of the COVID-19 crisis, and this conflict threatens our economies, and more specifically, your economy. To face up to that impact in Africa, among others, we are committed. We said that much a few weeks ago. As early as March, we committed on that farm initiative. Its goal is to circulate foodstuffs so that there be no blocking of the situation, no storage issue, but also to produce more in countries that need it, especially African countries. We'll meet again later on. We have to train. This is an increased production, farming production goal, and we also want to build more autonomy in Africa in terms of fertilizers and more production, and also private-public partnership. This has to be established. France invests in farming in Cameroon, has been doing that for a long time, but this is a way to strengthen it and to settle this emergency. As you mentioned, President, we are talking about cooperation between our two countries, cooperation between academic systems, training systems, public and private systems. This is also an opportunity to give a fillip to the dynamic forged by the last October summit between France and Africa in Montpellier. I was struck by the live members of the civil society in Cameroon who came there. And this is why at the end of this day, I will go and listen to and talk to the young generations, both French and Cameroonian, on the French policy in Africa and the relationship between our two countries and youths. We'll speak of issues such as civic participation, sustainable democracy, patrimony, sports culture. This is all a challenge for us, and we want to build further that partnership between the two countries. In just a few words, this is the meaning of my visit, and part of what we talked about with the President just now. We covered a whole range of issues, bilateral issues, regional security, regional cooperation. We just about went around the world, but on each issue, we laid down a specific agenda with regular meetings. Once again, I am glad that I want you to be convinced that France wants to work with you along these lines. Thank you.
Bonjour, messieurs les chefs d'État. Yves-Marc Mejo, journaliste à la CRTV, la radio-télévision nationale du Cameroun.
National Radio and Television. I'd like to talk to the French President. Mr. President, Africans, Cameroonians in particular, have seen financial partnership and the military equipment that the West gives to Ukraine at war. We know that African countries are in economic difficulties or even in conflict, and they find it difficult to receive the same gifts, the same assistance. Mr. President, how do you feel responsible for these double standards? Well, let me say first, I read a lot of things that are very approximate regarding what's going on in Ukraine. I'm not going to carry out any excessive comparison. Ukraine is a sovereign country. Its sovereignty and territorial integrity was violated by a unilateral aggression, Russia. That's how it should be seen. It is a war launched by Russia. Our rules, the Charter of the United Nations, the documents we signed, also signed by Russia as a member of OSCE, show that they violated almost all of their international commitments. Now, we Europeans made a choice. We cannot participate to that war, but it should be recognized and appointed. Oftentimes, people are hypocritical, especially in Africa, and I say that with a lot of calm. This is a war. It should be said, and it should be also seen who launched that war. There are diplomatic pressures, but it had to be said. We decided to stop that war, as the President said, and I'd like to remind you that a few days ago I went to Russia and Ukraine to try and stop that war. To stop that war without participating in that war. So what do Europeans do? They sanction Russia. They want to block that war effort. And in all international circles, we want to isolate Russia. And that's where we need you. Otherwise, that will go on and on. This is not the kind of international order that we want. We want cooperation and to respect everyone's sovereignty. And then we help Ukraine to resist financial and economic assistance, aid to refugees, and military aid by providing equipment. That is what this is about. Now, in Africa, there are no countries that are in a comparable situation to be attacked by a neighboring power, which we would have to oppose. But I do see countries that were destabilized by terrorism. That's quite true. You're talking to a head of state who is proud to be the head of a country that was committed, that has been very clearly committed. I say that very clearly. We did not just provide arms in Africa. We sent troops upon the demand by a sovereign country, Mali, and a regional country, a regional association to defend them. Defend this national sovereignty, and we provided a lot more than to Ukraine. And we had to bury soldiers, French soldiers, who came to Africa to defend the sovereignty of a country that was not theirs. That's the reality. Double standards, you say? But it's the other way around, not along the lines that you said. The French army, upon the demand by Mali in 2013, intervened to stop terrorists. And then French army, upon a request by the regional association in Mali, stayed to protect people. And now there is no caliphate in Mali because of French army and because dozens of our French children died in order to preserve that. So talk about others about double standards. France is the country that committed the most to protect the sovereignty of African countries. But we make a definite requirement to fight against terrorism. After two coups in Mali and the choices made by the junta, we decided to leave and to change our military system. We now have a military cooperation system with many African countries, including Cameroon. And this means that we deliver equipment, we do training, we have partnerships, and we want to advance on that route to strengthen our military bonds. I could not be more exhaustive or clear to mark the situation between the difference between those two very different situations. President Paul Biya, thank you for having us. Radio France International. Can you hear me clearly? We talked about the future. Will you be, do you want to be a president in 2025, or do you want a different candidate for your party during the next presidential elections? Do you want me to repeat your question? Sorry about that. RFI, Radio France International. Can you hear me now? Good. My question, will you run as president in 2025, or do you want a new generation to represent the RDPC, your party, during the next election? You can't hear me. Will you run as president in 2025 for your party? Thank you, madam. As you know, Cameroon is led on the basis of its constitution. It's governed on the basis of its constitution. Now, this constitution says that my term runs for 7 years. Do your maths. 7 minus 4 or 3, and you will know how many years I have left to govern the country. Now, having said this, when I come to the end of my term, You will be informed whether I run or whether I go back to my village.
Bonjour, je suis Georges-Alain Boyomo,
Georges-Alain Boyomo,
au quotidien camerounais Mutation.
Mutation, a Cameroonian newspaper. Two questions to Emmanuel Macron.
Alors, Monsieur le Président, au cours d'événements organisés en France,
during events organized in France,
avec la relation France-Cameroun,
there was no connection with the French-Cameroon relation. You exposed the contents of your conversation with your Cameroonian counterpart. You think that is the best way to give your opinion on human rights and democracy in Cameroon? And the tone that you used was not very diplomatic. So do you believe that was the best way to respond on human rights and democracy in Cameroon? I have a second question. There's a sincere friendship between Cameroon and France. And so there should be no dark places. There would be truth should out. The liberation war that took place in Cameroon left unpleasant memories, wounds, atrocities committed by the French army on Cameroonians. Decades later, now, can you recognize those atrocities? And do you assume the responsibility for those atrocities? Thank you, sir. On your first question.
La diaspora camerounaise en France,
the Cameroon diaspora in France is part of the rich relationship that we have. You're probably talking about this when I walked in the agriculture show. Someone called on me, and I answered the truth, but I didn't say anything about the contents in our discussions, the discussions that we had about individual situations with the president. These are situations we don't understand. That's the reality. That's what I should tell binationals of the Cameroonian diaspora. They would not understand if I said I spent many hours with President Biya on the telephone, but we don't talk about those delicate issues. They would not understand that. No, we speak in a very demanding way of the issues we have, and we try and find intelligent solutions respecting the sovereignty of both countries. So I don't think I divulged any secret. What I said was that the role of France and the nature of the dialogue that we have, that's what I said. Now, we have a common past, as you said. We do have a common past. Some of its pages are glorious, happy, where we built it together. Several destinies came together. That was fortunate, but there were also sad, unfortunate moments. Some historians looked at that past. They said there was a conflict, a war. It is up to historians to shed light on the past. And we should keep on writing together that history. That's why what I wish is this. We should launch together a joint historical work between Cameroonians and French historians. They will have access to all of our archives, and I solemnly commit to opening all our archives to that joint historian group. And this will shed some light on our past, on individual situations, on episodes you mentioned, and to say precisely what took place. France's involvement, the role of the Cameroonian government at that time, before and after the independence, in an environment when things were probably more complex than you said. But we should be serious and responsible to establish what the facts were. So what I propose is to find the conditions to do that work. I said that much to the President. We should set up a committee of historians that will work together and have access to all those archives. Also, within that joint commission, that joint committee, we should have artists working. I was struck by the fact that Cameroonian artists, binational artists in your diaspora, were used as an imaginary matrix that period of history. So they should be involved. We're going to set up a schedule for that committee, and they should soon give their conclusions. There should be time enough to access whatever is necessary, and we should have achievements and results from that work in the coming years.
Bonjour, Christelle Méral,
France Télévisions.
We've been listening there to the French President Emmanuel Macron holding a press conference with his Cameroonian counterpart Paul Biya in the capital Yaoundé. The French leader has begun a 4-day African tour. It is his first trip abroad since his re-election in April. In those remarks that we've been listening to there, Macron vowed to deepen ties, both military and economic, in a region that has seen rising anti-French sentiment. The leaders also discussed food insecurity. The region is heavily dependent on imports from Ukraine, and instability there has been a rising problem. Cameroon's President Paul Biya, meanwhile, who's been in power for 4 decades, left the door open for another 7-year term. This in response to a question from a correspondent from our sister station, RFI. Macron is then set to move on to Benin and Guinea-Bissau.